When I was 15 years old, I stabbed my own mum. Well, according to my foster care records, I did. And listen, it's not funny, but I'm just traumatized. Everything is funny at this point. I know exactly where this came from. When I read this in my records, me and my mum couldn't believe it. Like, listen. So my mum kicked me out when I was 14. We had a terrible relationship. I've never gone into the full reason why she kicked me out, but it was a number of things going on for a number of years. We get on really well now, but obviously there was a time when we didn't. She kicked me out. I lived with various friends, partners. Sometimes I slept on buses and in car parks. It's all good. My life's good. Especially compared to a lot of care leavers. Like, I still feel like I'm one of the lucky ones. After being homeless for nearly 10 months, and social services knew the whole time. Like, social services were involved when I was 7. They were very aware of me. After my mum kicked me out, they refused to put me in care, and they told my mum that they were going to take her to court for neglect and abandonment. If they'd done that, there would have been a court order that put me into foster care. But social services never took her to court. That's why I never went into care. And social services kept saying, you're your mum's responsibility, you're your mum's responsibility. My mum would say, well, no, social services are. And I became like invisible for nearly a year. How I eventually got put into care, and I've touched on this before in other videos, I had finally had enough. I went down to the social services office with and I did that in my arm. I still got a little scar. And the reason I did that wasn't because I was someone that liked to SH myself. It was because I'd remembered a conversation where a social worker had said to me I wouldn't be put in care unless I was a danger to myself or other people. And I'd finally had enough. After nearly a year of homelessness, I finally had enough. And I thought to myself, I'm going to show them. I'm going to show them that I'm a danger to myself. I was put in care that evening. Imagine being in a car, right? Imagine I was being driven to this foster placement and all I was thinking was I should have done what I did 6 months ago, 7 months ago, 8 months ago. When an investigation of social services took place, so this was a couple of years ago, I went through care, left care, years later made complaints, sued social services. When the investigation was going on, it was a stage 2 investigation. The investigators noticed that in my records, it didn't say why I was put in care. Like, they could literally see for a year social services saying, no, we're not going to put you in care. No, we're not going to put her in care. We're not going to put her in care. And then suddenly I was in care. So the investigators were like, well, where's all the documents? Where's all the evidence of why she got put in care after you kept denying it? Social services said they didn't know. I don't know if they buried it, shredded it, or if the documents were never created in the first place. I have no idea. But to this day, there is nothing in my records that explain how they went from nearly a year of not putting me in care to suddenly doing it. What it does say though, halfway through my records, in your records, when you get your foster care records, right, and if you want to know how to do it, just comment and I'll make a video about how. When you read your records, there are so many documents like that will say your background, and then there'll be other information and information about foster carers and foster care diaries, and then further on there'll be more background about why you're in care. Like, a lot of it is repeating itself. And in one section, which explains why I was in care and what I was like as a child, it says I injured my own mother with a knife. And the reason I was dramatic in the beginning and said the word stabbed, the actual wording in the records is injured her mother with a knife. The reason I say stabbed though is because me getting into care, it was referring to how I got into care. And this one little sentence says, the day before I was put in care, I injured my mother with a knife. That never happened. I didn't do it. And when I showed my mum this piece of paper that says it, my mum was like, what the fuck? I don't remember you doing that. And I was like, I know. It also says in my records, so I had tried when I was a teenager, I think I was like 14, I tried weed a handful of times, like literally 3 or 4 times. Hated it, never tried any other drug again. In my records, I told a social worker that. Because this was when I was still naive and thought you could trust your social worker. The social worker had asked me if I'd ever taken drugs. I said, I've tried weed a handful of times, didn't like it. Multiple times in my foster care records, it says I'm a drug user, that I'm a heavy cannabis smoker. And I never was. I never have been. Why it annoys me, these two things. First of all, I didn't find out this stuff until I actually got my records. So from when you're allowed, I didn't get my records until I was about 23, 24. That stuff had been written when I was like 15, 16. So I have just calculated, but I think that's 8 years. For 8 years, however many years. For years, this stuff was written about me and I had no idea. And it also concerns me that if professionals looked at my case notes, which you would have, I had 9 social workers. So that's potentially 9 social workers who have looked at my records and seen, oh, she's a drug user and she stabbed her own mum. That's terrifying. Like, those are some serious, especially the mum thing, that's a serious allegation. You can't just put that there. As soon as I read that, I rung social services. Got in touch with the right person I was supposed to speak to. Got in touch with my PA. And I said, this is written in my records. And she was like, yeah, I know. I was like, but it's not true. It didn't happen. And she was like, oh, well, you know, the social worker who wrote it doesn't work here anymore. No surprise. Do they ever? Doesn't work here anymore, so we can't talk to her about it. I'm like, okay, right, but can you delete it? Can you get rid of that? Because as well, I don't know who else. Doctors can have access to my records if they want. Psychologists would have had access to, like, imagine it says something about you, something written about you, you have no idea how many people have seen it. I was fucking stressing on the phone. I was like, you need to remove it. She was like, we can't. I was like, why can't you? And she said, because it's a professional document, we can't edit it. And again, the person who wrote it doesn't work here. So I'm like, what? So that's just staying there now. It's forever in my foster care records going to say I stabbed my own mum. And they were like, well, yeah. And then she was like, oh, but I can write in your records that you deny it happened. That's the wrong... I was like, no, don't write that I'm denying it. Write it didn't happen. Like, it didn't happen. There's no flipping doctor's records of that ever happening. There was no police investigation. Like, my mum can even tell you that didn't happen. You need to write that it didn't happen. And she went, we're not allowed to word it that way. We just have to say that you denied it. And I'm like, but saying, oh, I denied it. I could deny anything. I could hit someone and then deny it. Writing, Slaney denies this happened. That's not helpful. I could deny everything. They could write that Slaney denies everything in her records. It doesn't actually mean anything. It doesn't hold any weight.